I'm Sarah. I'm 35 years old. And if you're listening to this, you might be nodding your head because you know what it's like to start over when you thought the hard part of your life was supposed to be done. 2 years ago, my world dissolved. 12 years of marriage, gone in a puff of divorce papers. What was left? Shared custody of my two amazing 10-year-old twins, Leo and Chloe, and a financial situation that made my stomach churn. I'd always scaled back my work as a pediatric nurse, just part-time, to be the primary parent while my ex, David, built his career in tech. When the split happened, David got the high-flying stock options and I got the sudden, terrifying need to work full-time, and then some, just to keep us afloat. I couldn't afford the sky-high rent in our San Diego suburb, and certainly not the cost of full-time childcare for my 12-hour shifts at the Children's Hospital. That's where my parents, Eleanor and George, stepped in. They live in a comfortable 4-bedroom ranch house in the older, quieter part of Mission Hills. George, my father, had offered the arrangement with a gruff, "It's just until you get back on your feet, Sarah. We'll help you save." I was grateful, truly, despite the complicated history that clung to our family like dust on old furniture. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the achiever who rarely rocked the boat. I was the one who worked all through nursing school, specializing in pediatrics because I genuinely love helping kids. But in my parents' eyes, especially Eleanor's, being responsible never quite measured up to being successful. And success belonged solely to my younger brother, Mark. Mark, now 32, was their golden child. He dropped out of college, but they'd funded his string of tech startups, and now he was pulling in 6 figures. Mark was flashy, I was steady. That pattern of deeply ingrained favoritism was always there, an unspoken rule in our house that I had long ago learned to tolerate, if not ignore. We moved in, the twins and I, and settled into a rhythm. Leo and Chloe are incredible kids. Leo is the quiet, artistic soul, always drawing detailed superhero comics and building intricate Lego worlds. He's sensitive, and the divorce had hit him hard, making his new environment particularly challenging. Chloe, on the other hand, is fire and spirit. She's my little advocate and a natural athlete, quick to stand up for an underdog, whether on the soccer field or at the dinner table. They were doing well in school, adapting, and I was doing everything I could to make our temporary stay work. I took the small guest room, and the twins shared the converted home office. I made sure to pull my weight, buying most of the groceries, doing all the cooking, and ensuring the kids were respectful of their grandparents' routines. My schedule was brutal, 3 or 4 12-hour shifts a week, often including overnights. This meant relying on Eleanor and George for the essential logistics. School drop-offs at Stevenson Elementary and pickups when my shift overlapped. The plan was simple if ambitious. Save every spare penny for a security deposit and the first 2 months' rent on our own place. I taped a savings chart to the back of my bedroom door, coloring in the bars diligently after every paycheck. The cost of living here is insane, as anyone in this part of California knows. But I was determined to give my kids the stability they needed and deserved. I felt like I was finally making real progress, accumulating a substantial nest egg in a dedicated bank account. I'd put myself on a strict budget, forgoing everything non-essential, living out of my old suitcases for the first few months until I finally bought a small, cheap dresser from a second-hand store. It was hard, but every time Leo and Chloe hugged me goodnight or Chloe won a ribbon at a track meet, I knew I was doing the right thing. I was so focused on this goal, so hyper-aware of being a good, contributing tenant, that I almost didn't notice the seismic shift happening just a few miles away, a shift that would soon redefine my temporary stay from a favor to a festering wound. That shift, That undeniable change in the family dynamic began the moment my brother Mark and his wife, Victoria, announced the birth of their first child, a baby boy. The arrival of their golden grandchild was about to cast a shadow so dark over my children that the subtle preference I had grown up with would look like parody in comparison. It was about to become less about saving money and more about saving my kids' spirits. They called him Finn, and the moment he arrived, the air in George and Eleanor's house changed, becoming thick with a kind of giddy, unapologetic adoration that eclipsed everything else. Mark and Victoria already lived in a beautiful, newly built 4-bedroom house across town in Coronado, a house my parents had generously co-signed the mortgage on. They didn't need space, but my parents created it anyway. The first sign that things were moving from preference to obsession was the formal dining room. That room which held every significant family memory. Thanksgiving dinners, birthday celebrations, the quiet talks after my divorce, was swiftly transformed. It became a lavish, designated nursery for Finn, stocked with equipment that would only be used during his visits. A $1,200 smart crib, a custom-painted rocking chair, and a surveillance monitor that Eleanor checked more often than the weather. It was extravagant and utterly unnecessary, especially considering the baby spent most of his time at his own home. The sheer volume of gifts was staggering. While Leo and Chloe, their only grandchildren for a decade, had always received perfectly nice, practical presents, clothes, books, savings bonds, Finn's arrival unleashed a torrent of luxury. Mark and Victoria would casually mention the new designer stroller or the latest high-tech baby gadget, always prefacing it with, "Mom and Dad insisted." This wasn't just gift-giving. It was an investment in a perceived lineage, a public declaration of worth. I remember Christmas that year vividly. Leo got a drawing tablet he'd begged for, and Chloe received a new clarinet case. Both were things they needed. Finn, who was 6 months old and couldn't sit up unassisted, received a tiny, gold-plated silver rattle and a personalized cashmere blanket set. Items clearly costing hundreds, but the real sting wasn't the money, it was the commentary. Eleanor had a new favorite topic, reminiscing about Mark's perfect infancy. Finn looks exactly like Mark did at that age. So alert, so clearly brilliant, she'd coo, bouncing the baby. Then she'd look at my kids and add, almost as an afterthought, "It's funny, Leo and Chloe always resembled David Moore, didn't they? Such a shame they didn't get Mark's athletic genes." Chloe, my fierce little athlete, overheard this once and stopped smiling. She came to me later, her voice small, asking, "Mom, is it bad that I look like Dad?" I pulled her close, furious but trying to stay calm. "Absolutely not, honey. You are perfect, exactly who you are." But the words, those small, accumulating slights, chipped away at their young self-esteem. I tried desperately to compensate. On my days off, I planned Sarah and the twins' days, taking them to Balboa Park or having special movie nights hidden away in my small bedroom. I redoubled my efforts to save, working extra shifts, promising them, "Just a few more months, my darlings. We will have our own place by Christmas." But the parental support I was supposed to be receiving started to crumble under the weight of Finn's visits. Eleanor would cancel on school pickups at the last minute because Mark needed her to watch Finn for an important business lunch. "Your brother needs more support right now," she'd say over the phone, the sound of the luxury rocker squeaking in the background. "He's new to parenting, Sarah." The irony was a bitter pill. I'd been a single, full-time working parent for 2 years, navigating shared custody and 12-hour shifts. Yet Mark, the well-funded, 6-figure earning golden child, was the one requiring constant support. I tried to be understanding. New babies are exciting. This was their first grandson from their perfect son. Maybe I was being overly sensitive, but my kids weren't. They noticed how their stories were cut short, their achievements met with a cursory nod before the conversation inevitably circled back to Finn's latest gurgle. The emotional weight of the situation was starting to affect my professional life. My stress levels were through the roof, and the one place I always felt competent and valued, the pediatric ward, started to feel like a temporary escape rather than my true calling. I knew I needed to speed up my escape plan, but the housing market here, as I'm sure you know, makes saving for a down payment feel like trying to empty the Pacific Ocean with a teacup. The end of summer brought a sliver of hope. I was only 3 months away from enough savings for a deposit on a modest rental. 3 more months of biting my tongue. 3 more months of reminding myself and my kids that we were merely guests. If only I had known that those 3 months would be violently cut short by a single, catastrophic announcement. As fall approached, the atmosphere in the Mission Hills house grew cold, taut with unspoken tension. I had successfully contained the drama, shielding Leo and Chloe as much as possible, but the emotional cost was mounting. It felt like living on a tripwire. Any small action by my children, a loud laugh, a misplaced shoe, a minor disagreement, was met with disproportionate criticism from Eleanor and George, while Mark and Victoria's sloppiness or perpetual tardiness was met with indulgent smiles. I found myself becoming a silent sentinel, always anticipating the next reprimand. If Leo lingered too long with his sketchbook in the living room, I'd swoop in to whisk him back to the office-turned-bedroom. If Chloe practiced her clarinet, I'd make sure she was locked away in my room, using pillows to dampen the sound, even though her band teacher had praised her discipline. "You're too soft on them, Sarah," Eleanor commented one night, watching me prepare a dinner of chicken and vegetables, my standard, healthy fare. "You let them get away with too much screen time." This came from the same mother who had allowed Mark to fail 2 classes in college before pulling him out and funding his first failed startup. Meanwhile, Victoria, who was supposed to be a health and wellness influencer, routinely brought over takeout tubs of highly processed food for Mark and Finn's meals, and Eleanor never once batted an eye. It was a glaring double standard that didn't just hurt me, it confused my children. Leo, who thrives on structure and logic, started questioning things. "Mom, why did Grandma get mad at me for leaving my backpack by the door, but Uncle Mark left his gym bag there for 2 days and no one said anything?" I didn't have a good answer, not one that a 10-year-old could process without feeling the heavy weight of rejection. I tried to combat the rising tide of stress with practical action. I took on every available per diem shift at the hospital, running on fumes but watching my savings account grow. This financial progress was my anchor, the concrete proof that our time here is finite. I had nearly $15,000 saved, enough for the security deposit, first and last month's rent, and a small emergency cushion in a decent, although small, 2-bedroom apartment. I was calculating that by mid-November we would be out. I'd promised the kids, "We'll have our own place by Thanksgiving, I swear." I showed them the savings chart, a small map of hope in the suffocating environment. The real heartbreaker was watching my kids withdraw. Chloe, the confident Spitfire, started practicing her soccer moves only in the small patch of the backyard where she couldn't be seen or heard from the kitchen window, terrified of being too loud for baby Finn, who wasn't even there most of the day. Leo, who had always been so enthusiastic about his school projects, stopped bringing his artwork home, worried it would clutter the refrigerator or be dismissed. One afternoon, I came home after a grueling 12-hour shift to find Leo sitting alone on the old swing set in the backyard, meticulously tearing up a drawing. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked, sitting beside him. He sniffled. "It was just a sketch of a dragon, Mom. I was going to show Grandpa, but Aunt Victoria told me the living room wasn't a gallery for children's scribble." And Grandma agreed. The casual cruelty of their words, often delivered with a sweet, patronizing tone, was the most difficult thing to fight. I started taking the twins to the public library in La Jolla almost immediately after school on my days off, a neutral territory where they could be themselves without fear of judgment. It was there, while charting during a brief lunch break at work, that I confided in Brenda, a veteran charge nurse I respected. Brenda, who has a sharp wit and even sharper emotional intelligence, listened patiently as I laid out the entire toxic dynamic. Her words were a sudden, clear bell in the fog. "Sarah," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "it sounds like your parents are treating Mark's family like honored royalty and yours like inconvenient tenants who should be grateful for the roof. That dynamic isn't healthy for children or for you." Hearing it stated so plainly, stripped of the emotional tangle of family loyalty, was an awakening. I realized how much I had normalized their dysfunction. It was no longer about enduring, it was about protecting. I drove around that evening looking at rental signs and called my old college friend, Lisa, who is now a realtor. "Lisa," I told her, "I need to get out. Now, I'm pre-approved, I have the cash, and I need a place we can call home, no matter how small, as fast as humanly possible." The countdown was on, but I had no idea that Mark and Victoria were about to drop a bomb that would force my hand and escalate my escape plan to full-blown emergency mode. The tension that had been simmering finally boiled over in mid-September with an announcement that was, in hindsight, the most predictable kind of betrayal. I came home from a late afternoon shift, tired but buoyed by the progress on my savings chart. Mark and Victoria were sitting at the kitchen table with Eleanor and George. Baby Finn nestled in Mark's arms, wearing a ridiculous, branded baby outfit that probably cost half my utility bill. The atmosphere was celebratory, and I immediately knew it wasn't good for me. "We've got some incredible news," Mark announced, beaming, directing the pronouncement solely at our parents, not at me. "We're finally starting the major renovation on our Coronado house, the one we've been planning for the last year. It's going to be a total gut job, but the increase in property value will be huge." Eleanor clapped her hands together, a familiar, sickening pride washing over her face. "That is marvelous, sweetie. You deserve it." Victoria took over smoothly. "The thing is, we'll need somewhere to crash during the construction. Our contractor says it should only be about 6 to 8 weeks tops, just until they finish the main floor." Before I could even fully process the audacity of their planning, George was nodding vigorously, the kind of enthusiastic support he rarely offered me. "You'll stay here, of course. We have plenty of room. The house is huge." My blood ran cold. Plenty of room? We were already 5 people in this house, myself, the twins, and my parents, and now they wanted to add 2 adults and a baby. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to stay level. "Actually, Dad, we are pretty tight on space. The twins are in the home office, and I'm in the small guest room. Where exactly would Mark and Victoria sleep?" Eleanor shot me a look, one of icy disapproval, the look she reserved for moments when I dared to be inconvenient. "Family helps family, Sarah. It's temporary. We'll figure it out." She didn't look at me again. The decision was made, sealed, and delivered without so much as a 2-minute family conference. Nobody asked how this would affect my children's already fragile stability. Nobody acknowledged the sheer hypocrisy that Mark and Victoria's temporary stay was for a luxurious renovation, while my temporary stay was for basic survival and saving for independence. I'd been here almost 2 years, and yet, in the space of 3 sentences, Mark and Victoria's 6-week stay was deemed infinitely more important. They moved in that weekend, a chaotic, loud invasion. George was suddenly active, helping Mark assemble Finn's temporary crib, a gesture he had never once offered when I was moving in the twins' second-hand beds. Eleanor cleared out an entire closet in the master suite, the largest in the house, for Victoria's clothes, even though my own belongings still mostly resided in my old luggage beneath my bed. The immediate changes were jarring and dramatic. Suddenly, Leo and Chloe were instructed, often sharply, to keep their voices down because Finn is napping. Their designated small corner of the living room, where they had kept a few board games, was now deemed clutter and was swiftly boxed up. The television, which they were allowed to watch for an hour after dinner, was now perpetually tuned to whatever reality show Victoria wanted to stream. One evening, I found Chloe sitting on the porch steps, tear-streaked and silent, her clarinet case resting beside her. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, sinking down next to her. She whispered, "Aunt Victoria told me I couldn't practice. She said the sound of the scales was stressful for Finn, even though he was in the backyard with Grandma and Uncle Mark." My daughter, who lives for her music, was being actively discouraged from her passion in the one place she was supposed to feel safe. The worst came when Mark and George started having loud, casual conversations about their project extension right in the kitchen. "The contractor found some foundation issues," Mark said, completely vague, looking smug. "Might need another 3 months, Dad. I mean, we might as well just stay through the holidays, right?" George's response, spoken loudly enough for me to hear from my small room, was the first shocking plot twist that confirmed my status. "Stay as long as you need, son. This is your home, too." I thought about the past 2 years, where I had paid for groceries, done the cooking, and kept the house tidy. I had been repeatedly reminded that my help was temporary and conditional. Yet Mark, who contributed nothing but noise and demands, was declared a co-owner of the house, simply because he was the favored son. The sheer, blatant injustice of it solidified the cold, hard certainty of my plan. I had to get out, not in 3 months, not by Thanksgiving, but immediately. Mark's indefinite stay had just cut my timeline down to days. The weeks following Mark and Victoria's temporary move-in felt like a suffocating social experiment designed to prove my children's unworthiness. The atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was actively hostile toward us. Every space outside of the twins' cramped bedroom was now implicitly owned by the Golden family. Victoria, who worked remotely as a digital strategist, had commandeered the spacious sunroom off the kitchen for her home office, claiming she needed absolute silence for her video calls. This meant Leo and Chloe couldn't play outside during the day, couldn't use the back patio, and couldn't even use the kitchen table for homework, lest they accidentally disrupt her carefully curated Zoom background. The disrespect was institutionalized. Victoria began rearranging my kitchen. She moved the healthy snacks I bought for the twins, apples, string cheese, granola bars, from the front of the pantry to the back, replacing them with Mark's protein bars and Finn's expensive baby food pouches. "I needed a better flow," she told me dismissively when I asked. She'd leave her laundry in the machine for days, forcing me to use the community laundromat on my rare days off. Mark started inviting his friends over for loud football watch parties in the living room on Sunday afternoons, completely erasing the twins' quiet movie time. I was constantly reminded through 1,000 small actions that I was a caretaker and a financial contributor, but I had zero say in the functioning of the home. The emotional toll on Leo, my sensitive artist, was becoming visible in his academic life. His teacher, Ms. Jenkins, emailed me with concern. "Leo seems withdrawn in class, Sarah. He's usually so enthusiastic about sharing his work, but lately he's quiet and his grades are dipping slightly." I knew exactly why. I pulled Leo aside and asked him what was wrong. He confessed, tearfully, that he was terrified of doing anything wrong at home. "Grandma and Grandpa yell at us for everything, Mom, even when I'm just walking too loud. But they laugh when Finn throws his toys. I don't understand the rules anymore." The innocence of his confusion, the failure to grasp the unfair logic of favoritism, broke my heart. Chloe, usually so resilient, was also struggling. Her clarinet practice was now a source of deep anxiety. After the sunroom incident, she'd missed several virtual band sessions. When I tried to talk to Victoria about finding a compromise, maybe Chloe could practice between 4 o'clock and 4:30 p.m. while Finn was reliably awake, Victoria simply shut down. "Her little hobby can wait, Sarah. My business calls have to take priority. She'll get over it." The condescension in calling my daughter's passion a little hobby felt like a direct punch. The second shocking twist, a small, subtle act of erasure, occurred on the refrigerator door. The refrigerator, the family bulletin board, had always featured the twins' magnetic artwork, school notices, and Chloe's track schedule. I came home one day to find everything, every last piece of my children's presents, had been ripped off and replaced. In its place was a huge printout schedule of Finn's daycare times, several glossy, professional photos of Finn, and a list of Victoria's home office hours. When I asked Victoria where the twins' drawings had gone, she simply said, "Oh, I tossed them." I needed a clear, central information hub. Didn't think anyone would mind if I tidied up a little. Tidied up. She hadn't thrown away clutter. She had thrown away the visual evidence that my children existed and mattered in that house. That night, Leo and Chloe retreated permanently to their small, shared bedroom. They ate their meals in there, did their homework in there, and played their games in silence. They were isolating themselves because the common areas of their grandparents' house had become a minefield. This self-imposed exile was the final, devastating piece of evidence. I had to act. I didn't just need a rental. I needed a sanctuary. I called Lisa, the realtor, the next morning. "Lisa, forget the showings. I need the lease signed on the 3-bedroom near Stevenson Elementary. Tell me what I need to do to get the keys this week." I was no longer saving for the future. I was executing an emergency evacuation. The urgency was palpable, fueled by the agonizing realization that my children's well-being was deteriorating daily under my parents' roof. I knew I was risking a huge family blow-up, but seeing the light drain from my children's eyes was a price I was no longer willing to pay for temporary shelter. The clock was ticking. I was now operating in full covert mission mode, juggling 12-hour shifts, my realtor friend Lisa, and the impossible task of keeping my growing excitement and necessary secrecy from my children and especially my parents. Lisa had secured a cozy 3-bedroom rental in our school district, a small, slightly dated house, but ours. The lease was signed, the security deposit paid. Move-in date, November 1st. I was ordering essential furniture, a couple of twin mattresses, a small kitchen table, to be delivered the same day, having everything charged to my credit card, using my old apartment's address as the temporary billing address to prevent Eleanor from seeing the statements. The internal emotional warfare, however, was constant. I kept second-guessing myself, a toxic habit ingrained from years of being the less favored child. Am I overreacting? Are they right that I'm just jealous of Mark? The final emotional tipping point came at a large family gathering, a Sunday dinner hosted by my parents in late October. They had invited my favorite aunt, Aunt Carol, a successful lawyer and the most emotionally intelligent person in our extended family. During the meal, Eleanor, as usual, launched into a lengthy, dazzling monologue about Finn's supposed genius, how he was clearly trying to stand at 9 months, how he was advanced for his age, and how these traits were obviously inherited from Mark's superior line. Then came the third shocking, personal betrayal, delivered with a smile. Eleanor turned to Leo, who was quietly eating, and said, "It's too bad you didn't get that quick athleticism from your father's side, Leo. David was always a star baseball player, wasn't he?" Leo's face, my sensitive boy's face, crumpled instantly. He tried to hide it, but the implication was clear. Any positive trait my children possessed was due to my ex-husband, and their perceived flaws were somehow rooted in my side of the family or their own lack of golden genes. I saw Aunt Carol watching me from across the table, her expression shifting from polite interest to profound concern. After the dinner, a meal that consisted almost entirely of Mark's favorite foods and none of the kids, Aunt Carol pulled me aside in the hallway, away from the constant chaos. "Sarah," she asked quietly, her voice laced with concern, "how long has it been this bad?" I see the way they look at Leo and Chloe now. They look small. "It's always been there, Carol," I admitted, fighting back a wave of tears. "But it's become a circus since Mark and Victoria moved in. It's like a competition that we are guaranteed to lose." Aunt Carol took my hand, her grip firm and validating. "They deserve better than to be treated as second-class citizens in their own family home, Sarah. That's not a healthy environment. And I worry about George and Eleanor, too. They're losing perspective, becoming blinded by this golden child narrative. It won't end well for anyone if they continue this way." Her words echoed Brenda's, giving me the final push of confidence I needed. This wasn't just about me being jealous. This was about systemic psychological harm to my children. The next morning, I overheard Mark and George discussing the renovation timeline again. Mark, sounding thoroughly comfortable, said, "It's going to be another 3 months, easily. Honestly, with Finn, it makes more sense just to stay through the holidays. We're settled here." George, ever the enabler, replied warmly, "You know you're always welcome, son. This is your home." It was the second time I heard those exact words, directed at Mark but never at me. The blatant lie that my temporary stay was necessary, while Mark's was open-ended, solidified my next move. November 1st was too far away. I had to leave sooner. I decided to pull the trigger on an early departure, knowing I could stay with Brenda for a few days if necessary. My exit needed to be sudden, dramatic, and undeniable, not a polite notice, but a declaration of independence. What happened the following Tuesday, though, sealed our departure with a swift, shocking brutality that I could never have anticipated. The following Tuesday, I was scheduled for a particularly grueling 12-hour shift at Scripps Children's Hospital. It was a chaotic day, staff shortages, 3 new complicated admissions, and not a moment to breathe. I barely managed to check my phone during my rushed lunch break. When I did, I saw a string of frantic, alarming texts. From Leo, 3:15 p.m., Mom. Something weird is happening. Grandpa and Uncle Mark are moving our beds. From Chloe, 3:20 p.m., Mom. They said we have to move to the basement. The basement, Mom. This is not fair. From Leo, for PM, Mom. They took everything. All our clothes and toys. Grandma said we don't deserve the good rooms upstairs. From Chloe, for Oh, 5 p.m. I hate it here. The basement is cold and gross, and there are spiders. Please come home. My heart plummeted, the adrenaline flooding my system. The climax of the betrayal had arrived, and it was crueler than I could have imagined. They had taken the office-turned-bedroom, my children's only safe space, and relegated them to the unfinished, uninsulated, concrete basement. That basement was notorious for water seepage when it rained heavily and had visible patches of mold in the far corner. It was unequivocally not a habitable space for children, especially not for Leo, who struggles with seasonal asthma. I immediately tried calling home, but no one answered. I called the twins' individual phones, straight to voicemail. I texted Chloe, "I will be home as soon as I can. Stay calm. I love you both." I marched straight to my charge nurse supervisor, explaining the severity of the family emergency. She was understanding, quickly covering my remaining 4 hours. But even with her help, handing off patients and completing critical documentation took another agonizing hour. The 20-minute drive home from La Jolla felt like an eternity. My mind was reeling. They actually did this. Without telling me, they put my kids in an unsafe, moldy room for the convenience of Mark and Victoria. When I pulled up to the house, I took a deep, shaky breath. I needed to be calm for my children, but the sight that greeted me inside ignited a cold, hard rage. Leo and Chloe were huddled together on the living room sofa, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Eleanor and Victoria were in the kitchen, casually sipping tea, acting as if they hadn't just committed an act of domestic violence. Mark and George were nowhere in sight. What in God's name is going on? I asked, going straight to my children. Chloe ran to me, burying her face in my scrubs. "They moved everything, Mom. They said they needed the space for Aunt Victoria's office and for Finn's play area." I walked into the kitchen, my voice dangerously low. "Eleanor, Victoria, why are my children's belongings in the basement?" Victoria, the picture of serene entitlement, didn't even look up from her tea. "We needed to make adjustments to the living arrangements, Sarah. Mark and I need a designated nursery, and my remote office space has to be quiet." It was the logical solution. The children are older. They can adapt. Eleanor finally met my eyes, her face set in a hard, defensive mask. "It's perfectly fine, Sarah. We put their beds down there. Besides, our other grandson deserves the best rooms. He is here all day while your children are at school." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her statement, the explicit declaration of my children's second-class status, sent a shockwave through me. My children deserve a safe, comfortable space just as much as Finn does. I shot back, unable to contain the edge in my voice. "Don't be so dramatic, Amanda." Eleanor dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "The basement is fine. We laid down some old carpet scraps. The basement has visible mold, it's freezing cold, and it has inadequate emergency exits. It's not a legal bedroom by any housing code standard." I pointed out the medical risk, the practical dangers. At that moment, George and Mark walked in from the garage, looking smug and satisfied with their afternoon's work. "Oh, good, you're home," George said, wiping his hands. "We've made some necessary changes we need to discuss." I looked at them. My father, my brother, my mother, my sister-in-law, all 4 adults unified in their callousness. The image was perfectly clear. They didn't see me as a daughter or an equal. They saw me as an inconvenience, and my children as disposable obstacles to the comfort of the Golden family. This was it. The time for talking, for patience, for saving was over. I made the instantaneous decision that would change our lives forever. The moment I saw the four of them standing there, Eleanor, George, Mark, and Victoria, united in their lack of remorse, something snapped, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I walked past them, ignoring their expectant silence, and went straight back to the living room where Leo and Chloe waited, small and anxious. I knelt before them, meeting their red eyes. "Pack your bags," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Right now. Pack everything important to you. Your favorite books, your supplies, your music." Leo looked confused. "Pack, Mom? Where are we going?" I smiled, a genuine, fierce smile that felt alien on my face, and shook my head. "Trust me, sweetie. Just pack the essentials. We're leaving." George followed me into the living room. "For heaven's sake, Sarah, stop being so dramatic. We're going to discuss this rationally. No one is asking you to leave." I stood up slowly and turned to face him, the smile fading into a look of absolute resolve. "No, Dad. You just made it abundantly clear where my children and I stand in this family, and we deserve better." Eleanor and Victoria, hearing the finality in my tone, hurried in. "What nonsense is this?" Eleanor cried, her voice rising in manufactured hurt. "You can't just walk out because things didn't go your way." Mark, holding Finn, stepped forward, his usual condescending smirk fixed on his face. "Come on, sis. Don't make a scene in front of the kids. Let's talk about this." "This isn't a scene, Mark," I explained, my voice calm, the quietest person in the room holding the most power. "This is about basic respect and safety. You moved my children into an unsafe, moldy basement without my consent. You told them to their faces that they are less important than Finn. That isn't a minor disagreement. That's a fundamental statement about how you value us." George's face was turning crimson. "After everything we've done for you, giving you a roof for 2 years, this is how you repay us? Sneaking around, then storming out over a bedroom rearrangement. A bedroom rearrangement that risks my son's asthma?" I countered, unwavering. "And yes, I repay you by being financially independent. You assumed I was dependent and irresponsible, but I haven't been. I've been working extra shifts, saving systematically, and 3 weeks ago, I signed a lease on a small 3-bedroom house near the hospital. The place is ready next week, but today's actions accelerated my timeline." The silence that followed was deeply satisfying. They were genuinely stunned, unable to process that their dependent daughter had an exit strategy they knew nothing about. "Where exactly are you going to go until next week?" Mark finally managed, the smirk replaced by confusion. "That is no longer any of your concern," I replied simply. Leo and Chloe came back downstairs, each clutching a backpack, Leo with his drawing supplies, Chloe with her prized clarinet case and a small duffel bag. "We're ready, Mom," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly strong. Eleanor rushed forward as I started helping the kids towards the door. "If you walk out that door, Sarah, don't expect to be welcomed back with open arms." I paused, looking at my father, my mother, and my brother one last time. "I stopped expecting that a long time ago, Dad." I helped the twins put their bags in the car, their small bodies shaking with fear and excitement. Mark, Victoria, Eleanor, and George stood on the porch, their expressions a mix of disbelief and anger. They had been so certain of their power, so confident in my dependency, that the reality of my departure was a foreign concept. As I started the engine, Eleanor rushed to my window, tears finally genuine. "Sarah, please, you're overreacting. Come back inside, and we'll figure something out." We will talk tomorrow, I said firmly, pulling away from the curb. When I come to get the rest of our things. But where we're going tonight is somewhere where my children are valued. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the twins looking back at the house that had been our prison for 2 years. There was no sadness in their eyes, only a profound, palpable sense of relief. We were finally, definitively free. The painful departure was the necessary catalyst for the life we were about to build. The car ride away from Mission Hills was a mixture of stunned silence and nervous anticipation. Leo, usually quiet during stressful times, kept glancing back, as if expecting his grandparents to chase us down the street. Chloe, the brave one, broke the silence. "Are we really moving to our own house, Mom?" she asked cautiously. "Almost, sweetie," I assured them, reaching back to squeeze both their hands. "We have a house waiting for us, but the lease starts next week. Tonight, we're going to stay with my friend, Brenda, from the hospital. Is it because of what Grandma and Grandpa did?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. I chose my words carefully, knowing this was a critical moment for their understanding of family and self-worth. "It is because we deserve to live somewhere where everyone is treated with respect and kindness, Leo. I have been planning for us to move out for a while now, but yes, what happened today made me realize we needed to leave sooner. It was dangerous and unfair, and we don't accept being treated that way." "I didn't like how they talked about us," Chloe admitted quietly, "like we were just in the way." My heart broke a little more, but I held my composure. "You are never, ever in the way. You are the most important people in the world, and anyone who cannot see that doesn't deserve to have you in their lives." Brenda lives in an apartment complex near the hospital, and she welcomed us with open arms, a true friend in crisis. She had already prepared her guest room, setting up an air mattress on the floor beside the queen bed for the twins. She'd ordered pizza, their favorite, and rented an old Disney movie for us to watch. The simple, unburdened normalcy of her home was a shock to our system. As the twins picked at their pizza with subdued enthusiasm, Brenda pulled me aside. "Sarah, I am so incredibly proud of you," she said simply. "It takes a fierce, deep courage to set boundaries like that with the people who raised you. You put your kids first, no matter the consequence." "I just wish I had done it sooner, Brenda," I confessed, the stress of the day finally making my voice tremble. "Before they hurt my kids like this." "You are doing it now," she pointed out gently, "and that is what matters. You broke the toxic cycle." That night, as Leo and Chloe slept soundly, nestled side by side on the air mattress, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Sadness for the loss of the functional family I always wished for, anger at the deep-seated favoritism, and anxiety about the logistics of the coming week. But underneath it all, a powerful, unwavering sense of peace settled over me. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself and my children without hesitation or apology. The next morning, I called in to use a personal day at work. I needed to focus on the retrieval mission. Brenda offered to keep the twins, suggesting it might be less stressful for them. I declined. "No," I explained. "They need to see this through. They need to see us going back, calm and unified, taking our things. It's important for them to know we are doing this together on our terms." We arrived back at Eleanor and George's house at 10 a.m. Mark and Victoria were conspicuously absent. Eleanor explained they had taken Finn to the park, hoping to avoid a stressful confrontation. George answered the door, a scowl on his face. "Did you come to apologize for your tantrum, Sarah?" he demanded. "No, Dad," I replied, evenly meeting his gaze. "We have come to get our things." He hardened his face. Your mother has been distraught all night because of your dramatic exit. I'm sorry she's upset, I said, genuinely but without yielding ground. But we are still moving out. Eleanor joined us, her eyes red-rimmed. I just can't believe you're doing this to us. I am not doing anything to you, Mom. I corrected her gently. I am doing something for my children and myself. You taught me the value of independence. Now you must respect it. We will pack, we will be quick, and we will leave. We will contact you when we are ready to talk. And with that, I guided Leo and Chloe upstairs, our mission clear, our exit quiet but absolute, cementing the final break from the toxic environment that had suffocated us for so long. The retrieval mission was executed with military precision. Leo and Chloe moved through their former bedroom, the small office, with a focused, almost triumphant energy. They packed their clothes, their books, and their essential items. I packed my meager belongings. Downstairs, Eleanor and George watched silently, the reality of our departure finally sinking in. George, ever the skeptic, made one last attempt to undermine my independence. Where exactly is this mysterious house you claim to have rented, Sarah? And how do you plan to afford the rent on your nurse's salary, especially in this market? The condescension in his tone was the final spark. I stopped packing my boxes, put down the tape gun, and faced him directly. This was the fourth dramatic, unexpected twist. The moment I stopped being the supplicant daughter and started being the successful adult. Dad, I make $85,000 a year as a specialized pediatric charge nurse, I stated, calm and clear. I have excellent credit, virtually no debt, and I have been systematically saving between $800 and $1,200 a month for the last 2 years. I am fully capable of providing for my family without your help. The look on his face, a mixture of genuine surprise and reluctant admiration, was priceless. He had genuinely not known, or perhaps had refused to know, the extent of my financial capability because it didn't fit his narrative of my dependency. Eleanor interjected weakly, "The rental market is impossible right now. How did you even find a 3-bedroom? I have friends and connections, Mom, I replied. Just because I didn't broadcast my plans doesn't mean I didn't have them. We finished loading my small sedan and drove away for the final time. The following Friday, November 1st, we moved into the small 3-bedroom rental in Claremont. The house was cozy, with a tiny, overgrown backyard and a kitchen that flooded with natural light. It was within the Twin School District, and my commute was now shorter. It was ours. The change in the Twins was immediate and miraculous. They chose their rooms. Chloe took the small, sunny room facing the backyard. Leo claimed the corner room that he immediately dubbed his art studio. They joked. They laughed and they played loudly, without the constant fear of being shushed. A few weeks later, the universe seemed to reward my courage with the 5th shock, a professional promotion. My supervisor offered me the permanent charge nurse position on the pediatric trauma floor. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, enough to push my income over 6 figures. And most importantly, a more regular schedule with far fewer overnight shifts. This meant more time, less exhaustion, and complete financial security. I was thriving, not just surviving. Meanwhile, news filtered down the family grapevine that Mark and Victoria were struggling. Without my unpaid labor, the cooking, the tidying, the incidental childcare, they were overwhelmed. Eleanor was exhausted trying to keep up with the demands of an active baby and a large house. Mark and Victoria moved back to their Coronado house before Christmas, even though the renovation wasn't complete, cutting their temporary stay short. The marriage, built on superficiality and enabled by my parents, was reportedly strained. The greatest validation, however, came from my children. Leo's anxiety melted away. His teacher reported his focus had returned, and his innate creativity had reemerged with a vengeance. He was accepted into an after-school mentorship program for gifted young artists. Chloe excelled, making the advanced band and starting to talk about trying out for the competitive soccer team. One evening, as I tucked Chloe into her own bed in her own sunny room, she sighed contentedly. I like our house, Mom," she whispered sleepily. "I feel like I can breathe here." That simple sentence, "I feel like I can breathe here," was worth every sacrifice, every painful confrontation, and every moment of fear. It confirmed that the house in Claremont wasn't just a physical space. It was a psychological sanctuary. We had broken the cycle, found our footing, and were ascending to a stable, joyful life where their worth was self-evident and unconditional. The separation from the toxic past had been painful, but the resulting peace was profound. 6 months after our abrupt departure, the quiet life we had built was one of peace and relentless forward momentum. Our small rental house, filled with the comfortable chaos of family, was home. I was excelling in my new role as charge nurse, balancing a demanding but fulfilling career with quality time for my children. Meanwhile, the dynamic back in Mission Hills was crumbling. I received updates through DMs with Aunt Carol, who became an invaluable source of support and information. Mark and Victoria's marriage, built on the shifting sand of external validation and my parents' financial support, was deteriorating rapidly without the buffer of my help. They were constantly arguing over childcare logistics, renovation costs, and domestic duties. Then, one Tuesday, I got a call from Eleanor. It wasn't the tearful, accusing plea I had grown used to. Her voice sounded older, heavier, and surprisingly vulnerable. "Sarah, could you come by for coffee?" "Just you. I'd like to talk." I hesitated, but agreed, setting strict boundaries. "I can come Thursday morning, but I can only stay for an hour, Mom. I have to get to the hospital." When I arrived, the house was noticeably less pristine than usual. There were dust motes floating in the sunbeams, and a general air of neglect. Eleanor was sitting in the newly vacant living room, looking exhausted. "I've been thinking a lot about last fall," she began, avoiding my eyes. She didn't launch into an attack or a guilt trip. Instead, she offered the first, tentative acknowledgement of guilt, the moment of humanization I had waited decades for. "I didn't realize how much we were hurting Leo and Chloe, or how much you were actually doing for this household, Sarah. Without you here, Mark and Victoria were lost. I was overwhelmed trying to keep up with Finn and the house. I realized I took you for granted." It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I had ever received, and it was rooted in the pragmatic realization of her own hardship, the ultimate consequence of her favoritism. I accepted it quietly, a small internal victory. "What happened with Mark and Victoria?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. "They moved back to Coronado before Christmas," Eleanor sighed. "The contractor insisted the main floor was done, but they just couldn't handle the stress here. They were fighting all the time. Now they're in couples counseling." She hesitated before sharing the sixth, significant shock. "Victoria went back to work full-time, Sarah. She and Mark are struggling severely with childcare arrangements. They thought having a baby would fix their problems, but it only exposed them." I nodded, feeling a twinge of sympathy, recognizing the universal struggle of parenthood, even for the golden couple. "I have to ask, Mom," I pressed gently, "what made you finally see it? After all these years?" Eleanor looked around the room, settling on the empty space where Leo and Chloe used to keep their backpack hooks and shoes. When you left, the house felt empty. Not just physically. I realized Mark and Victoria bring noise and expectation, but you brought stability and peace. When they took Finn back to their house, and it was just George and me again, George started complaining about how much effort it was to simply run the house. He actually asked me, "How did Sarah do all this while working nights?" That's when it hit me. We were so busy building Mark up, we tore you down. We saw Mark's child, but we stopped seeing yours. It was a profound moment of reflection for her, the crack in the facade of the golden child narrative. Eleanor's admission proved that the separation was the only thing that could force their introspection. Our absence created the vacuum necessary for them to confront the toxic reality of their behavior. This wasn't just a story about me winning. It was about my parents facing the human cost of their lifelong favoritism. The path to a genuine, if limited, reconciliation was finally beginning to open. The change in Eleanor was noticeable. She began visiting the rental house occasionally, always bringing a small, genuine gift for Leo and Chloe, like art supplies or a book she knew they would enjoy. She stopped talking about Finn incessantly and started asking about Chloe's clarinet lessons and Leo's art program. The visits were brief, cordial, and most importantly, based on mutual respect. The biggest surprise came in April, almost a year after the separation. A small 3-bedroom house in our rental neighborhood, a darling little craftsman that needed some cosmetic love, went up for sale. Thanks to my charge nurse promotion and my relentless saving, the price was just within my financial reach. I consulted my mortgage broker, made an offer, and to my absolute delight, it was accepted. I was officially going to be a homeowner. It was the news of the house purchase that brought George, my stoic, proud father, back into my life in an unexpected role. I was sitting in my kitchen, overwhelmed by the volume of the inspection report when I received a text. "Call me. Need to review the inspection report. Dad." I called him back immediately. "Dad, I appreciate the offer, but I have a realtor and a broker." I know, he interrupted, his voice gruff, but lacking its usual controlling edge. "But I have decades of experience with home repairs and assessments, Sarah. Let me look at the guts of the house. I want to make sure you're not getting screwed." I agreed. He came over the next evening, and we sat together at my small kitchen table, poring over the documents. He was all business, checking the HVAC age, assessing the roof's remaining lifespan, and scrutinizing the foundation report. He didn't criticize my choices. He only offered practical, seasoned advice. "The roof has maybe 5 years left," he noted, circling a point on the paper. "But you'll need to budget for replacing the water heater sooner rather than later. It's an old model. Good call on the neighborhood, though. Property values are solid here." His practical support, offered without a single controlling comment or condescending remark, was a huge, subtle step forward in our dynamic. It felt like he was finally seeing me as a capable adult, not a child to be managed. As he was leaving, putting his glasses back in his case, he paused at the door. He looked around the small, comfortable living room, then back at me. This was the moment of humanization for the elderly father, a moment of unexpected, profound vulnerability. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," he said, the words catching slightly in his throat. "Buying a house on your own in this city with 2 kids is no small accomplishment. I know. I haven't always been fair or good at showing support." The words I had waited for nearly 4 decades to hear hit me with the force of an emotional tsunami. I couldn't speak for a moment. "Thank you, Dad," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. He continued haltingly. Eleanor and I have been talking a lot about how we handled things. I can't change the past, but I would like to do better going forward. For you, for Leo and Chloe. It wasn't a full, perfect apology. George doesn't do perfection, but coming from my proud, stubborn father, it was monumental. It was a sincere offering of a future based on mutual respect. The day we closed on the house, I was alone, but I took a picture of the keys. Standing in the empty living room of my house in my neighborhood, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought me to my knees. 2 years ago, I was a dependent, newly divorced mother, uncertain about my future. Now I was a homeowner, a senior charge nurse, and a provider who had secured a permanent, stable future for my children. The greatest betrayal, the basement incident, had become the greatest catalyst for this success. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was a non-negotiable act of self-preservation and love. The final move into our new home took place on a sunny Saturday in May. It wasn't the lonely, tense process of the first move. It was a celebration. Brenda and several colleagues came to help, as did Aunt Carol. And in a significant sign of the evolving family dynamic, Eleanor and George. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful. Eleanor helped me unpack kitchen boxes without offering a single piece of unsolicited advice, and George spent the afternoon in the backyard, helping Leo hang a tire swing on the old oak tree, a quiet, powerful act of physical presence and devotion he had never offered before. By evening, with the furniture arranged, the boxes mostly unpacked, and the celebratory pizza ordered, only my parents remained. We sat together on the newly painted back porch, watching Leo and Chloe explore every inch of their small backyard, laughing freely. "This is a good home, Sarah," Eleanor said quietly, her eyes following the children. "You have done well." This time, I accepted the compliment without internal debate or doubt. "Thank you, Mom," I replied. George leaned back in his chair. "Mark and Victoria are selling the Coronado house. They need to downsize to get out from under the heavy mortgage and focus on their counseling. The renovation stress almost broke them." It was the final piece of the puzzle. Mark's facade of success, enabled by my parents' adoration, had crumbled under the weight of reality. As the sun set on our first day in our true home, I reflected on the journey. The pain of that October day, the basement betrayal, had transformed into the catalyst for everything positive. Sometimes the deepest betrayals force the most necessary departures. What had seemed like a devastating ending was actually a beginning. The beginning of true independence, of teaching my children the value of their own voices, and of demonstrating that worth is never conditional. Later that night, I tucked Leo and Chloe into their own separate rooms, their own safe, unshushable spaces. "Mom," Leo murmured, already half asleep, "can we get a dog now that we have a backyard?" "We'll see, sweetie," I whispered, kissing his forehead. I went into Chloe's room. She was reading under her nightlight. "I love having my own room, Mom," she said, looking up at me. "I don't have to worry about being quiet anymore." "You never have to worry about being quiet here, my love," I assured her. Family, I had learned, was not just about blood or obligation. It was about mutual respect, consistent kindness, and the choice to value each person for who they truly were. My children and I had created our own unbreakable family unit, and we had opened our circle to include the two people who were finally ready to treat us with the dignity we deserved. We had come through the storm and found ourselves on solid ground at last. The elderly parents, George and Eleanor, though late to the lesson, had found their own path to redemption by acknowledging their failure and choosing to support, rather than control, their daughter's hard-won success. It was the best, most authentic happy ending we could have ever asked for. I hope our story resonates with you. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your family is pack your bags and create the life you all deserve. Thanks for listening, my story.